But interestingly, we are stuck at a temporal time which juxtaposes very nicely with whatever's gone before us. The Honourable Minister talked about how life had changed desperately in terms of from when he was a teacher to when you're a teacher now. And thereafter, Sir Mason Dury talking about deductive scenarios and how life could be so different coming into it, 20, 30 years from now. And to that I'm going to add this little bit of anecdotal evidence that I've got from all the different principals and DPs and emerging leaders I've been working with over the last 2 years here in Rotorua. And focus on the fact that, hey, where you're sitting, there are a lot of driving forces, there are a lot of critical uncertainties that make life today very different from anything you've seen before. And I'm going to use that as my organizing framework as I talk about a few futures mindsets for leaders. Okay. Before I start, I thought I would get a person all of you are very familiar with, Gary DeThieri, to say a few words about the big challenges that you face. Gary himself is facing a huge personal challenge today. He's gone for surgery at the Waikato Hospital. So I'm sure all our prayers are with him. So Gary will start now and talk to us about the challenges you face outside the school gates.
Welcome to our Ngāti Manawa conference. Eric Hoffer once stated, in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. Our world is rapidly changing outside the school gate. My question to you is, how are our schools moving to enable and empower students to meet the changing world we should be preparing them for? How are we enabling and empowering students to be adaptive learners that will not only survive but will be productive contributors to this exciting world of change and their future? I hope today goes some way in answering these crucial questions.
Great. Gary talked about the challenges that children will face outside the school gates, but really when we look at it from in the school and with you as a teacher with grounded context, life is pretty volatile, it's pretty uncertain, it's very complex, and it's quite ambiguous when it comes to making meaning. Why is that? I mean, you look at a young student coming today into school, you no longer know where the student's actually coming from, because there are so many cultures juxtaposed within any school. I know, for example, in Rotorua Intermediate, there are more than 33 nationalities studying. You don't know what children talk to each other about. You don't know how they want to be addressing their learning. You don't know what they do when they leave the classroom. You don't know how they connect with each other. And that's just a student. Teachers today come and you don't know how they need to relate with each other in the staff rooms. When they get into the classroom, if there's a classroom or just a learning environment, and so on and so forth. Okay? So let's understand one thing very clearly, that each one of you lives in very challenging times. Alright? And when you ask people about change, when I ask the average person about change, when I ask myself about change, the first thing that we all say is that I'm very comfortable with it. I can roll on a dime, I can dance like Fred Astaire or those broken eggshells, and I'm very comfortable with change. But all the evidence shows that we are very poor when it comes to adapting to change. First, we are very, very slow and very demotivated. Second, we are very reticent and very crisis-driven. Third, we are paradigm blind. Even as stuff is changing around us, we want to believe that nothing's changed. And fourth, we are problem solvers. We are able to address stuff that we've seen before, but we are very poor at creative solutions. Why is that? And the answer to the why is that is this whole area of expertise. You know, each one of us is an expert at something. And when you're an expert, it's very tough to let go. Why? Because you are the sole bearer of an answer that nobody else has. So looking good becomes more important than being good. And actually, every organization that any one of you work in actually fosters the idea of looking good. Alright? Temporary incompetence, the ability to say, hey, guess what, I don't know, is a career-limiting thing to do. More often than not, therefore, we are very scared to admit ignorance. And as every bit of learning theory will tell you, the start of any learning is a beginner's mind. And a beginner's mind is about accepting that you just don't know. So what is the problem when you find it very difficult to let go? Well, the fundamental problem with not wanting to let go is that you're an expert. And you're an expert on yesterday. As long as today looks like yesterday, you're a hero or a heroine. Moment today is very different from yesterday. You're going to create the chaos of tomorrow by applying solutions you learned by solving problems yesterday. So having set up this argument, I'm now going to come to this point around leadership mindsets for the future. And there are really, you've heard me talk about these mindsets many times. This is a favorite area of my research and teaching. All right. But what I want to focus on today are 3 specific mindsets. All right. And I'm going to frame them around this skill for adaptiveness. And then these 3 very august people on the dais, Hine, Narinya, and Nikki, are going to actually try and ground it in your context, okay? And my challenge really is to give them enough time, so I'm racing, okay? So here are the mindsets for the future. The first one is about paying attention. The second one is around collaborative inquiry and collective wisdom. The third is about a strengths orientation, and finally the last is about learning as the best form of adaptation. Now, I'll very quickly run through the lot, all right, and see how much you like it. So paying attention. 100 years ago, a guy called William James said that the faculty of bringing back a wandering attention again and again is the very root of character, will, and judgment. Absent this faculty, no person can be said to be master or mistress of themselves. And yet it's an easier thing to talk about in principle than it is to establish in practice. Then there was this guy called Walter Mischel, fast forward 1963. And all of you know about the marshmallow experiment, that's why I put it up there. Alright? Because what and for those of you who don't, where were you in 1963? Alright? So, those of you who don't, he took preschool kids, in the big nursery, and basically set them a test that can try the soul of grown-up people. Right? He said, hey, here's a marshmallow. It's sat in front of you. You can eat it now, or if you wait for a few minutes, I'll come back and give you 2. Fast forward to the final solution, about 30% of those little kids waited for more than 12 minutes, which is quite amazing as a feat. And while many results came out of that experiment, I want to focus on one thing that Walter Mischel said. And Walter Mischel said that what that experiment showed is that you cannot control the world and what it does to you in terms of circumstance, but you sure can control the way you think about it. Alright? And that's where paying attention comes. Csikszentmihalyi, the guy I've quoted there on the screen, he says that, hey, at the end of the day, each of us has about 110 bits of information available to us at any time. And you've got to decide how best to use it. And imagine 110 bits of information is not too much. And I mentioned this to you folks in the sessions before. You know, if you're listening to me and you're watching the PowerPoint, already 100 of that 110 bits is gone. If your neighbor turns around and starts chatting with you, there go the 110 bits. Now, if you live to 75 years, and you're awake 16 hours of the day in those 75 years, you have roughly about 173 billion bits of information to play with. Now that sounds like a lot of information that you have, but fact is that when you take out all the little bits to tie your shoelace, make breakfast, driving your car to work, etc., the substantive amount left for the important things in life is very little. Now here's the key. Whatever passes through the filter of your attention is the only thing your life comprises of. Right now, outside this little auditorium of ours, in your schools right now, there are a bunch of kids fighting with each other because the teacher isn't around. But you don't know about it. It's not part of your life. Right? So what passes through the filter of your attention decides not just the content of your life, it decides the quality of your life. So being mindful and paying attention is the first great mindset for the future. Then we come to this concept of collaborative inquiry and collective wisdom. In the 1990s, there was a computer company called Linux, which was a software. It's the beginning of open source software, where a bunch of random co-developers working together for free, all right, working on software collectively, produced something that actually challenged a well-structured, humongously well-resourced company like Microsoft. I'm talking about Linux. Now, a lot of lessons came out of Linux. And one of the biggest lessons that came out of Linux is to do with collaborative inquiry and collective wisdom. What they found was that a fairly random, completely unknowing of each other, group of co-developers walking through the design space of your project are quite amazing when it comes to solving problems and fixing things, because why? The more the eyeballs, the shallower the bugs. It's much easier for many eyeballs to make light work of fixing bugs. That's the first part. Then Wikipedia came around in the 2000s. And I know it's a research tool for many of you. So, Wikipedia proved the corollary of that finding. In Wikipedia, 150 million users to the site every month. Wikipedia said that it's not just that random eyeballs walking through the design space of your program actually helps because it finds shallow bugs. Multiple eyeballs walking through your project means multiple ways of looking at the project. And that is a surefire possibility for success. And then when you bring it all together, one of the big things that we learn from this whole area of innovation, divergent collaboration research now going on in innovation, we understand that one of the big things for making this work, collective wisdom work, is the fact that there is a shared community. Shared community is much more important than even technology and resources. You better believe it. And to build shared community, you need to understand this concept of collaborative inquiry. Why? Because as human beings, we've used prosociality, this thing of getting along with others, this thing of building relationships. We've used it as a strategy in evolution. All right? And our big challenge going forward, and many of you have come from a competitive paradigm into a collaborative paradigm, and everything I'm saying is absolutely true. The big challenge for us is how do we use shared community collaboration to help us progress in evolution, while at the same time making sure that as individuals we are successful. Okay? That is a big mindset for the future. Thereafter, I want to get you into this area of adaptation. So there's a guy called Cole who says that learning is the the best form of adaptation for human beings. And I don't mean learning in just classroom terms. Okay, I'm taking a much broader view of learning. I'm taking a view of learning, across age, from when you're an infant to when you're adolescent, when you're growing up, when you're old as, right through that learning that goes on. I'm talking about learning that goes through different areas of community, whether it's a research laboratory, whether it's your school, whether it's out in the farm, or wherever learning is going on. All this learning contributes hugely to adaptiveness. See, and learning in its holistic area is also free of time and space. You folks go for performance, where you learn about performance, and that's about short-term adaptiveness to immediate circumstance. Then you go for learning courses, and that is about medium-term adaptation to generic classes of problems. And finally, you go for your development stuff. And that is about lifelong adaptation to life situations. So in every stage of life, in every frame of life, learning turns out to be the best form of adaptation. So what is your big challenge with learning? Your big challenge with learning is to understand that as people who are steeped in experience, you need to be able to learn from it. And to be able to create knowledge from experience, you first need to grasp that experience, and then you need to transform it. That is a challenge that you need to face. And that is a big mindset for leadership in the future. And finally, I want to cover this thing called strengths orientation. I come from a very constructivist paradigm. And for me, strengths-based perspectives are the most powerful perspectives you can have. About 100 years ago, I love these 100-year-ago things, because they always come back to the present. About 100 years ago, a guy called Albion Small said that if what you're doing needs to be something that contributes to vitality, to generativity, to fecundity, then it's got to be persistent. It's got to be intense. It's got to be thorough, and it's got to be systematic. And all that it has to be why? To make a human being the best possible human being that person can be. Now that's a big challenge. And what do strengths-based perspectives say? Well, really strengths-based perspectives, when you look at positive psychology, when you look at appreciative inquiry, and any other constructivist paradigms, strengths-based perspectives say a lot of stuff that you can boil down into one or two big points. Number one, it says that, hey, human beings are more drawn by their future than driven by their past. So any philosophy, any psychology, any kind of learning that says that, hey, it's about aspiration, it's about planning, it's about volition, personal choice, is much, much, much more better than anything that talks about behaviors, drives, and circumstance, where you're a captive of something that you're not in control of. The other big thing that strengths-based orientation say comes straight from constructivist research methodologies like appreciative inquiry. And there it says that the topics we study are fateful. The direction of your inquiry will determine what you will find. Because as you go through life asking questions, you're constructing and creating as much of the reality as you're discovering. So doesn't it make more sense to look for what works rather than what does not work? When you look at a strengths-based perspective, therefore, at the end of the day, each one of you has got to understand that if you want to make a difference in your worlds, and God knows, you affect a lot of worlds, because as speakers before me have taught, you touch so many different dimensions when you touch a child and teach them to be something in life. You've got to remember four things. That any attempt to change a social system works best when it's appreciative, when it's provocative, when it's collaborative, and when it is actionable. To summarize, here are the 4 mindsets for the future. There are a couple more, but I don't have the time, so next time. Alright, so the first mindset for the future is around paying attention, because what you pay attention to decides what your life is. Alright, the next one is around collaborative inquiry and collective wisdom, because there's a whole load of power in working community for success. The third is around this whole area of learning as the best form of adaptation, because it's something you do all your life, right? And the fourth is a strengths-based orientation, which as teachers you all totally subscribe to. I know that from my various interactions with you at various platforms. So you know what that means intuitively, and that's why your children flourish. So now I want to come back to you folks, because as most of you know who've been in any of my sessions, I always have a last slide. And my last slide for you is straight from Maya Angelou, and it's to do with you. And it says something about success that goes like this. Success is liking who you are, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. And 3 cheers for all of you for being successful. Thank you very much.